Ho! Ho! It's us.
Right on time, 4 o'clock, the Jimmy Doane Show.
That's right. This is Counselor Curtis. And I'm here with Jimmy Doane.
And I'm here with Counselor Curtis.
Today is the 5th of August. Oh! Happy birthday, Jimmy.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no. What, you're like 700 and...
Very old.
It's,
really old.
looking good for 700 and something.
Well, on this day in history, Marilyn Monroe died.
Oh, really?
Yeah, age 36 in 1952. I remember that. Or 19... Is it 52? Or 62? 62.
52, 62.
62. I think.
Yeah. Well, hey, we've had a little streaming issues, so if the copy isn't perfect because it's coming out right now, you could be watching us live, of course. 4 p.m. we stream live Wednesdays and Sundays on YouTube. But if you are and the video isn't perfect, I'm going to post a better video here very soon. So yeah, it looks like we're having a little streaming problem.
Errors coming up.
Yeah. But I'll have a good copy. So anyway, what's happening today?
Okay, well, several things. And let me just kind of get started here in no particular order.
Mm-hmm. In no particular order, huh?
Well, no, I had a couple things that were kind of light notes, but I'll save those till
the super important stuff.
Good-looking girls in the light notes. A California requirement that new models of semi-automatic handguns stamp identifying information on bullet casings when fired is a real-world solution, quote-unquote, to help solve gun crimes. A divided U.S. appeals court said Friday in a decision that upheld the novel law. Now, this of course, is the Ninth Circuit, which, of course, this will be overturned in the Supreme Court, pretty much. But the bottom line is it's impractical. I mean, you're going to identify every bullet casing?
Well, I mean, impractical doesn't come into play too much in court rulings. There is a little bit of consideration that's given to that, but mostly it'll come down to what they think is the law. But you're right, the Ninth Circuit gets overturned regularly on these sort of fringe issues.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I thought it was interesting that it was new guns, new types of guns.
Yeah, apparently it's new. I'm not sure exactly because it's supposed to be the stamping requirement and two measures intended to make guns safer did not violate the Second Amendment because they left plenty of firearms for sale in California and were reasonable to further the state's goal of keeping people safe.
Right. Now,
2-1 decision for the...
So the number of gun accidents is quite small.
Right.
But, of course, you always hear it in the news when it's a child blasts their face off or something.
Well, the one guy that dissented on this, McCowan, joined by Judge Clifford Wallacewater, also rejected the argument that stamping technology was impossible to implement, which of course is interesting because we see various legislatures all the time passing laws that make no sense at all, absolutely unimplementable, and well, no, you see it all the time. I mean, what's interesting is that sometimes they get overturned and then sometimes they don't. Yeah,
well, it just seems like kind of a.
I mean, one of the things we have, for instance, in our Florida Constitution, that the state shall provide an effective and worthwhile education to all students. Mm-hmm. Well, it doesn't. It never has and can't.
What?
Yeah, no, sorry. So, I mean, I just thought it was interesting that they're going to go after I guess the cartridges or something, some kind of stamping thing.
Yeah, well, like we were talking about at the last show. This has to do with if you can't track the guns, track the bullets.
Right. Well, yeah, good luck on that, too. I mean...
Well, look, the whole thing, as we've talked about a million times, it's a fool's errand from the beginning, from day one. But knock yourself out.
Knock yourself out. That's about it. Okay. Well, moving on. This is kind of interesting for me because I'm an Apple aficionado.
Yes.
For being the richest company with over $243 billion in cash now. This is
cash.
Cash, right. Cash. Now, this is kind of a hit piece on Apple, but I'm going to tell you why it doesn't make any difference. This guy says it sure cuts corners in the stingiest ways. The hardware giant became the first trillion-dollar company this week. Yet it's tough to reconcile Apple's earning $11 billion in profit per quarter with it still screwing us over cords and keyboards. The quote, huh?
It's perfectly easy.
Yeah, right. No, I mean, it's exactly. The quote, "it just works" philosophy has slipped through the cracks of the money printing machine. It's not that Apple couldn't afford to fix the problems. It's just that it's ensnared in the hubris such that it doesn't see them as important. We still turn to Apple because they make the best core products, but the edges of the customer experience have frayed like the wires of a lightning cable. Well, of course, the lightning cable is one that connects stuff to your iPhone and stuff like that. And there is no question, that the keyboards and some of the adapters are like unbelievably overpriced. I mean, some of these adapters to do some $50.
Right.
You paid on your iPhone, for instance, you pay $600 for it, and you're in for another $100 just in the adapters.
Right.
And spare cables.
Right.
That kind of stuff.
Well, I gotta figure they ran some business models and determined they could get people on the cords and adapters.
No question. I mean, the simple fact is, the market has decided
it's still worth it.
It's still working. It's a $1 trillion company.
Right.
So, in spite of, now what's also fascinating, as I'm sure you're aware, is that all of these adapters and the cords, instantaneously come out on eBay or third party at a third or half or a quarter of the price.
Right, and if you really want to get them cheap, what you do is just go to any hotel and say, "Oh, excuse me, I stayed here and I left my phone adapter," and they'll pull out a big box of adapters.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, yeah.
I did not know that.
Any kind you need.
Oh my God, that's good to know. That's a money-saving hint from Jimmy Doane.
That's right.
That's great. Well, anyway, I know that some of this stuff is so cheap. And still, it doesn't last. I mean, the cord that goes from your charger to your phone, for instance, they don't last that long. But instead of paying $40 for them, you're paying $5, so you get 9 of them,
right?
Whatever, and they just you throw them away. I mean, they're disposal. So anyway, but the bottom line is a $1 trillion company. People are loving the iPhones.
Yeah, the model works.
The model works. That's
right. And here's another thing that I want to point out about the $1 trillion company. This was a company started by 2 guys in a garage in 1976. Okay, so and they were going up against IBM,
right?
And
they were going up against a lot. They were going up against not only IBM, but because IBM was major computers, but even the mini computers of the time, DEC and Data General. They were making these $60,000, which were small, but very effective computers.
Okay, so monopoly status. Someone might assume that IBM had a lock on everything in 1975.
That's right, and these guys decided to do whatever it was, and here it is, 45 years later, whatever, not even that, 43 years later, and it's a $1 trillion company.
The biggest.
Yeah.
It just goes to show you the market in a few decades can just completely change.
Right.
You look back at the Fortune 500 companies from 50 years ago and see which ones are still on there. Now, a few of them have merged and changed names, so a few of them are still on there, but the list is quite different from what it used to be.
Well, what's interesting, speaking of the General Electric dropped off the Dow 30 Industrials just recently because they're not making it.
Yeah, and people have been talking about.
They were there for 80 or 90 years.
Their stock is down like 40%.
Well, whatever. I mean, the point is that people, you hear these. This is what the market does. And if you think that Apple is going to live forever, or that Facebook, or any of these other people, some 2 kids in a garage are going to come up with something. And I mean,
no regulation needed.
No,
is what it comes down
absolutely
to.
No. When you think about it, the guys that started. Let's see, what was the one that started? Sergey Brin and what did they start?
Google.
Okay, 2 guys started Google. Okay, that was it, and of course it completely displaced the other, the other browsers.
Right.
There was a thing, for instance, the other day on Big Bang Theory, where Sheldon and this other guy were battling it out on which browsers they had used in the past.
Right, they were listing.
They were listing the browsers, and I mean, there's like 20 of them that I mean, I even used Ask Jeeves, and I mean, these were great browsers in their day, but almost everybody. Well, for what you got. I mean, seriously, if you wanted to put in a couple of keywords, and what the stuff that came up was certainly better than not doing it.
Right.
So that was anyway. The market has figured it all out. And as I say, if you think that the largest companies, the Sears, Roebucks, and the Krogers, and the
well, Apple, I will say already. Look, Apple lost its leader. They've lost its visionary.
right,
And so I don't care what you say, the trajectory has changed in
I
that
see.
company.
yeah,
And the corporate culture may last another generation,
right.
but it's going to demise. It's going to deteriorate without
Well,
his
and it's interesting
vision.
because the corporate culture, what you've been finding about the corporate culture in Google, for instance, when some guy writes a little innocuous thing, and he's fired, and all everybody's all kumbaya, and you're thinking, wait a minute, this is you may be math geniuses, but your idea of manipulating your employees like this, to me, I don't see it.
Well, we'll see if those companies end up instrumenting their own demise by their self-selection process.
It's interesting, and then you look at something like Facebook, which a lot of guys do. They just buy up the competition,
Right.
And of course, then the next thing you know, Congress wants to run in there and do something about it. They were talking about. I read an article the other day that is it time to break up Google? What are you talking about?
Well, right.
I mean, when I think about the breakups of years gone by, for instance, when Standard Oil was broken up by the antitrust people, I mean, the whole thing, it was getting ready to collapse anyway. Not collapse, but it was getting ready. Electricity was coming on board instead of just oil, and new oil fields had been found in West Texas that were 10 times the size of the ones that were depleting in Pennsylvania and the Midwest, where Rockefeller was getting his oil from. So, I mean, the market was figuring all this out, and suddenly the government jumps in and stifles it to some extent, and they do this all the time. So, and this was even, hard to believe. Okay, here's another thing that is a big deal. You've spent a lifetime paying into Social Security, but there's no guarantee that you're going to get out what you put in.
Everybody knows that.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, everybody does know that. Anybody that's in their 30s or 40s, if they think that they're going to get a check commensurate with what they've stuffed in there, they're dreaming. I mean, they're delusional. So, but anyway, I think that this article,
We could have a huge population explosion.
yeah, we have, unfortunately. That's one of the things. The demographics have changed rather dramatically.
Right.
When Social Security was founded, the average life expectancy was like 62, and so half the people were not going to pay in and not collect. So now, of course, the average life expectancy is 80 or something, and they haven't changed the retirement age. Well, then maybe a little bit, but they've dorked around with it.
Look, that's all they're going to do. At some point, they have to do either means testing and/or increase the age. I mean,
Or they're going to increase what they've been trying to do for years is when there's a cutoff of like $112,000 that you pay in to Social Security for really rich people that pay in that. Then there's a cutoff, and what they want to do is to expand. Say, okay, there is no limit. If you're making $20 million a year, you pay your full boat on Social Security up to the $20 million, including that. So anyway, there's no guarantee. But anyway, this is one of the things that I think that's interesting. Couple of things. The federal government this week admitted for the first time since 1982 it needs to dip into Social Security's trust fund to pay for the program this year. Now,
it's a little dip.
Yeah, well, the thing about it is, what is the trust fund? It's debt. They're going to what they have to do in order to dip into the trust fund is not like it's any kind of cash and money. It's a demand on taxpayers to pay when they sell these bonds to pay those bonds off. And so they basically they're instead of an asset that they're dipping into debt. I don't know how else to explain this because you don't solve a debt problem with more debt, and that's what this is doing.
Well,
the Social Security Trust Fund is a drawer with bonds that need to be paid off sometime from the taxpayers.
Okay,
and so they're going to have to raise taxes in order to pay for bonds if they're going to give the money to Social Security. But anyway, it doesn't matter. As it is right now, anybody listening to this, if you're collecting Social Security like I am, you know, the amount of money I get is trivial. I mean, compared to what I put in. And of course, it hasn't raised in 8 or 10 years.
Look, what you should know, what everybody should know about Social Security, everybody should Google Charles Ponzi,
right,
and Mr. Tontine. Is it Riccardo?
I forget.
It's an Italian name. Lorenzo.
Okay.
Lorenzo Tonti.
Right.
So Google those two guys and
Right.
read about their schemes.
Right.
And then you'll realize that Social Security is a combination of those two schemes. It's a Ponzi Tontine.
Right.
It relies on more people paying in than will be taking the money out.
Right.
And it's a pyramid scheme from the beginning.
Right.
So those
Day
two,
one.
and those two schemes are outlawed because
Right.
people can't do.
Well, I don't know if tontines are outlawed.
It is because the reason is because it incentivizes people to kill off the other members.
Ah, okay. I didn't know that.
The tontine, the way the insurance that works is a bunch of people pool together a bunch of money, and then the last one standing collects the money.
Okay, well, they used to do it. Of course, one of the days they used to do it was when a brigade or something or a company would get together at the end of the First World War, and they would have this bottle of wine, and the last person would get the bottle of wine. Well, that's hardly worth killing it.
Right, exactly. And that's different, you know.
Right.
That's a quantum of solace, is what that is.
That's right. That's right. No, that's exactly what it is. I mean, last man standing, and what's interesting is that the Ponzi has been illegal for almost 100 years.
Right.
And Social Security is the largest one around.
Right. It's nice. It's big. It's government supported. Well, it's the same thing as you know. I don't want to go off on a tangent, but it's the same thing as the taxes. It's so official and it's so well ingrained into the culture that nobody's going to question.
Well, they've called it, of course, for years. They've called it the third rail. What's interesting is actuaries realized in the 70s that at the time, whenever the rate was whatever it was, 5% or something, instead now it's 15 for whatever they collect on your wages. But back then, even then, the actuaries realized we're going broke, and of course nobody at that time talked of it as much as a Ponzi scheme as it was. But the actuary and Congress has from time to time taken steps to shore up Social Security, and now they're talking about.
Thank you, Bill Clinton.
Yeah, well, and not only that. I mean, I think the first fix was in the 70s.
I was talking about for the word "shore up."
Oh yeah, okay. At any rate, the monthly checks, it says, could be cut 23% by 2034, and you know, 2034, wait down, who cares, you know, that kind of thing. But
it'll be on you before you know it.
That's right, exactly. That is closer than it sounds. The bad news doesn't end there, and this is the other thing is this week's report by Social Security trustees. I love this, trustees, right? The trust fund. Trust us. We're good people.
Well, that's what the pitch is. Is that, like you said, it is assets. It is a drawer, not with bonds, but with securities.
Right. So it's trust fund. Yeah.
Well, yeah, there it is.
So anyway, the Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin had even tighter time frames for the other pieces of Social Security safety net. It said that Medicare's hospital insurance fund will be depleted by 2026, 3 years earlier than forecast a year ago. Now, I mean, think about this. A year ago, they were figuring 2029, and in 12 months, and you got to ask yourself, what's going to happen 3 years from now? Yeah. I mean, here we are in 2018, and now they're talking literally 8 years from now.
Right, well, we can extrapolate that pretty quickly.
Yeah, right, it'll be next year.
Just about.
and it says in 2026, unless changes are made, the program will only be able to pay about 91% of costs. Well, you know, 91% is 91. If that's the, I don't believe it.
But of course, next year they're going to revise that.
Revise
31%.
That's right. So the.
Well, look, this is a train wreck that was put on the track and headed towards the station 40, 50 years ago.
Right.
And nobody has taken the brake off of the pedal yet.
No.
That's just all that this is. This is a huge train wreck heading for Debt Mountain, and there'll be a big kaboom at the end unless somebody does something, and everybody's afraid.
It
like
has
you
to
said.
collapse.
Well, right. Somebody has to derail the train.
Yeah.
Somebody has to absolutely derail the train and reorganize the system in a completely different way that does not involve the government providing charity.
Good luck.
Well, exactly. That's why I say completely different way.
Yeah,
And that's why I say this is a train.
No, people, look, the simple fact is the guys in Congress want to stay elected, and they'll promise you anything.
Ain't nobody.
As we've seen with Maduro.
Well, right.
And
And we'll get to him in a minute.
Yes.
But, well, here's the thing that the leaders will do. They'll get behind an idea. So if somebody writes a book about how the train wreck is going to happen, or how it can be averted or something like that, and it gets super popular, some politician will stand up and go, I will champion this, and so they'll get behind it if the idea is popular enough, because like you said, they just want to get elected,
right?
So that's a popularity in any form is a means to election. So as long as it's not notoriety.
If you're going to fix Social Security by smoke and mirrors, where you let your Maine.
No. I'm talking about fix.
No, I know, but I'm saying if your fix involves a reduction in the money going to the retirees, of which there are 77 million of them, yeah, you no way you're going to be popular on that one.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you. What I'm saying is, if somebody else makes it popular, somehow. Somebody makes the idea popular.
Okay, this is one of those hypothetical things.
Well, a little bit.
And
not really.
If an asteroid comes in,
well,
from
look,
outer space,
the difference is that, like you said, the politicians aren't motivated to do that, but the populace is. And there's a bunch of us out here who, if I could write a book that would solve the problem and make it popular, not only would I get the royalties off the book,
right,
but then you'd be the one who solved the problem. And of course, and what you would do is, I would think, I would know some politician would get behind it. So,
well, the problem, the solution is castor oil. I mean, nobody wants it.
Well, that's true. It's bad.
That's simple. Yeah.
Bad.
So I mean, to solve the problem, it is quite simply pain, very bad pain.
Right.
So okay, moving along.
Yeah.
We're going to have a little Venezuela.
Venezuela.
That's right. We're going to have a little Venezuela. Two things that are kind of interesting. Explosive drone-like devices went off as Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro was giving a live televised speech in his country's capital. And nobody was hurt, but apparently there was a drone. And we've talked about this before. How do you protect? I mean, I'm surprised that they didn't get him myself. I mean, who in this day and age, for $500-600 you can get a hell of a nice drone.
I would think, yeah, and I would think, those bombs. What you do is you have the bomb, and then you have like the bag of marbles around it, or the bag of buckshot, basically.
Right.
And then all you got to do is get it within 50 yards of the guy.
Right.
But I guess they didn't get that close.
I guess not. I mean, I'm kind of surprised because we've talked about this before, where you could, and I see this coming, where you get an army of drones.
Right. Flying 20 of them.
Flying 20 of them. Good luck on getting them all out.
Well, and how about flying 20 of them, the jet-propelled ones, not the little propeller ones, but you do like the little miniature jets.
Really?
Yeah.
I haven't even seen those.
Yeah, well, that was one of Engineer Eric's ideas, was the miniature turbine engine, and eventually somebody created it, and they do them now, but it's rare. It's a super specialty in the field.
Right.
But they'll have an F-16 sometimes at the little show, as big as this carpet here. And my guess is you could load it up with enough explosives to do some damage.
Well, I tell you, if it's C4 or something like that, you don't need much.
No.
So I mean, it can make quite a big bang, as we say.
It's going to be a different military universe pretty quick.
Yeah.
Because of that drone technology.
Well, not only that, they're getting smaller and smaller too. I mean, you think about it; they've got these drones now that are minuscule.
Well, the big thing right now, and the limiting factor, and what will make the difference is the flight time.
Yeah.
As soon as the flight time, every one of those drones that you see online, those videos are longer than those drones can stay afloat.
Really?
Yeah. They just don't fly for more than a few minutes, and so you can't. How far can you get the thing within a few minutes? Just right over the stadium wall or something. So you got to be in the parking lot or something. So if they can get them where those drones can fly for an hour or 2 hours or 12 hours or something like that. then you're going to see some crazy stuff, because then you can fly them from the Gaza Strip over into Jerusalem or something. I mean, then you can do some.
Well, one of the things is in order to get that kind of power, you need more fuel. I should say larger.
That's
batteries.
what I'm saying. Either a better battery.
Yeah.
I mean, and a much better battery, like nothing that we've even got sitting around in a closet. Elon Musk doesn't have a battery that good, but that's what you would need. Or like you said, you need a refueling station. There's one theory of having little other floating drones out there that sort of go up and refuel each other. Yeah, I know, it's kind of, and then there's just no way to collect enough solar power fast enough to keep something afloat at this point yet. We don't have that kind of technology.
Well, that brings up a point, and that is, how much do you need? I mean, if you extend the flight time only by 15 minutes.
Right. Well, they did create that one plane with all the big, the huge winged plane with all the propellers on it, and it just goes, it's super high, and it just floats along, and it's got the solar power. I think it'll stay aloft for days.
Mm-hmm.
But again, a super
too big.
Yeah, way
shoot
too
it
big.
down.
Right. Oh yeah.
I mean, the fact is, if you get something much larger than 8 or 10 inches across or a foot across or something, blammo. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so the next thing though, which is interesting, speaking of Venezuela, under fire, President Nicolas Maduro admitted his economic model has failed.
Yeah.
In the wake of food and medicine shortages and public service paralysis, such as Tuesday's power failure that affected 80% of Caracas. Can you imagine a power failure that affects 80% of Gainesville? People would be in the streets in no time.
Well, or setting up their bomb drones.
Well, or else there'd be a shortage of generators over at what you call it here. Of course, I doubt if you could buy a generator in Caracas. It would cost you $27 billion. One of the things when you realize that the International Monetary Fund is projecting inflation rate of 1,000,000% next year for Venezuela, so if you can imagine. The production models we've tried so far have failed, and the responsibility, I love this, and the responsibility is ours, mine, and yours. Well, no, it's yours. I'm sorry.
Ours,
no, it's not.
Yours.
No,
that's nobody.
That's nobody. That's right. And the simple fact is,
that just goes to show you this guy's level of commitment. You know?
Exactly.
And it's your fault.
That's right.
Well, and of course, the way he's going to heal his economic plan is to do the same thing.
He's going to. First of all, he says, as Venezuela looks to tackle chronic inflation, which we said is going to be 1,000,000%. Well, here's the deal. I forget exactly. I think it was Ludwig von Mises when they were having this huge inflation in Austria or wherever he was at the time, and he went out on the street corner and they said, how do you cure inflation? And he says, listen. And they heard the printing presses. He says, turn off the printing presses. Mm-hmm. And that was the printing presses that were making money. Mm-hmm. He says that will cure your inflation. Well, the simple fact is that if you're printing 1,000,000 times whatever the money was last year, turn off the presses. I mean, that's the only thing that causes inflation is government printing money.
But then you don't have any money.
Again, so that's the price you have to pay. I mean, so anyway, so he says, enough with the whining. We need to produce with or without outside aggression, with or without black, because we need to make Venezuela an economic power. And what's interesting, they have a 4-year-long recession, and of course, they used to be an economic power. I mean, literally 8-10 years ago, they were an economic power.
This is what we expect from
I know, and so the socialist government over recent years has this is the thing that's so funny about this. They've nationalized various industry sectors, such as cement and steel, expropriated hundreds of businesses, including supermarket chains, and lately brought in the army to control the street markets and guard against rising prices. I mean, at the point of a gun, you protect against rising prices. He also fixed prices on various goods and imposed monopoly on foreign exchange. Now, what's interesting is, even here in Florida, I mean, in the United States, with Nixon, he imposed I guess it was during the first, no, it wasn't it couldn't have been during the first oil crisis, but when inflation was heating up in 71, he imposed wage and price controls, and of course, it only lasted about 1.5 years, and even he figured out it wasn't working. But what happened was when they froze the price of gasoline or oil or whatever it was during the first Arab crisis, I think, which is in '73. I mean, the lines, and instantaneously, a couple of years later, whenever it was, when they lifted the price controls, instantaneously, the lines disappeared, as people were suddenly willing to pay 60 cents a gallon instead of 30 cents.
As you know, it takes a leap of faith for them to embrace the free market.
Right.
Maduro's not going to get there.
No.
I can't see that happen. This is a mea culpa, and he's going to come out and do the same thing. That's
right. Yeah, I mean, if you hadn't done it yet, I mean, seriously, when you have riots in the street and people fleeing the country, I mean, what are you thinking?
He's thinking,
not my fault.
Hugo Chavez.
Yeah, right. Not my fault.
Right.
So anyway, he said,
not my fault. Exactly.
Yeah, right. I estimate it will take about 2 years. Now he's going to buy himself 2 years, reach a high level of stability, and see the first symptoms of new and economic prosperity.
Green shoots.
That's right. Without for 1 second affecting Social Security and protection. So, Social Security, as we just said, is a Ponzi scheme. Mm-hmm. So you're not going to affect that. Everybody's going to get their check. Now, what's interesting is if you're getting a check for, I don't know, 1 million bolivars, a month or a year, whatever it is, and next year you get a billion, or you don't get a billion.
Right,
well, the prices have gone up 1 million. So, it's, well, you can see that it's not going to work. So Venezuela's GDP is expected to plummet 18% this year, meaning a fourth consecutive year of double-digit falls. Now, the GDP, here in the United States, they had a GDP on an annualized rate increase of 4% in this last quarter or whatever it was. And that's what you do with growth is, you have this 3 and 4 and 5% GDP growth ostensibly. One of the little minor problems, of course, is that GDP is measured, also includes government spending, which is, of course, since the government is a huge part of the economy, sometimes you got to wonder about that. So the public transportation has ground almost to a halt, with the local councils offering free rides in unsafe and uncomfortable pickup trucks. Free, again, it doesn't matter. They're branded kennels by users, so that's interesting. So it's interesting that Maduro, who blames Venezuela's woes on economic war waged by the United States, called on his party supporters to help kickstart production and resist U.S. aggression. And of course, the U.S. has aggressed. We've got sanctions on Venezuela. I mean, apparently a fairly good shot. I have no idea why, because the place is going to collapse anyway on its own. You don't need us to be in there meddling with it. But Venezuela's crude oil sales account for some 96% of the country's revenue. I mean, how do you sustain that when the price of oil has dropped from 150 to whatever it is today, 70, half price, and the industry is operating at just 30% by the farming sector, which supplies barely a quarter of national consumption, when just a couple of years ago it was 75%. So that's
That's what happens when you socialize industries.
Nope, that's right.
They get horribly inefficient.
They do. They cut because there's no downside.
Mismanagement is built into socialism. It's a core feature of socialism is economic mismanagement.
It is stunning because you've
removed the incentives.
Octavia, whatever her name is, going for
Ocasio-Cortez,
yeah, right, for socialism and some other.
She doesn't know what it is.
No, I know. She's what is she? 28. Yeah,
she's a bartender.
What's this interesting? Yeah, well,
when they put her on the spot, she'll be like.
Well, again, fortunately she's a one vote in Congress if she gets in.
Right,
she'll be one vote, and but apparently some other candidates in places in like San Francisco and so forth are running on basically the same platform. So
we talked about it. Justice Democrats.
Yeah,
we'll see
that's
what
right.
they say.
Okay.
What else we got?
Okay, what else we got? Guess what?
What?
The resurrection of Star Trek.
Okay.
Sir Patrick Stewart has just announced the news on Instagram, timed to line up with an onstage announcement that the Star Trek Las Vegas 2018 convention, they're going to have another Star Trek movie starring, which one was he? The second generation woman?
Yeah.
TNG. And so now it's 20 years after the last show, so he's aged a tad. I remember one of the shows they had him all, in he went into the future and he was there in his grape vineyard or whatever. But I don't know what he's going to look like. Actually, in the picture they showed, he looked pretty good. No, he didn't. He looked pretty good. He looked pretty. I hadn't aged much in 20 years. And of course, they have makeup. I will always be very proud to have been a Star Trek. And when we wrapped up the final movie, 2002. So that's been 16 years. And so now they're going to start. They haven't even got the script yet, but according to this guy, they've got the funding and so forth. And I guess it'll take a couple of years to put it together, but still, it never dies, right? It never dies. Okay, next item. This is another thing that we always love. The civil rights groups and lawmakers are demanding that the TSA, we love these people, TSA explained the program that tasks federal air marshals at airports and on domestic flights with monitoring Americans who have committed no crimes. I love this. The program called Quiet Skies. Okay, this is what they always do. The Patriot Act. I mean, it's another
gentle laws.
Gentle laws, right? Don't worry about it. Quiet skies. Right. And this is the Patriot.
Don't worry about it. Law.
Aren't you a patriot? First reported by the Boston Globe is described by air marshals by conducting surveillance of U.S. citizens who get the attention of the marshals by fidgeting, sweating, trembling, or staring, or exhibiting other suspicious behavior. That's when they put the air marshal on the plane behind you, and they watch you for suspicious behavior.
Sure.
Fidgeting, sweating, whatever.
But those are the signs. Look, there's nothing wrong with this as long as they're not following them home or anything. I mean, right?
Well, you don't know. I mean,
you don't know.
The Council on American. I remember they know who you are, and so and so needless to say, the Council on American Islamic Relations called on the TSA to drop the program, saying that it may single out law-abiding Muslim travelers for official harassment.
Let me tell you, they've been over this issue in the courts for things. For example, when a cop gets behind you in the traffic, he can run your tag.
Right.
Okay. Even if you're not doing anything.
Right.
He can run your tag.
Right.
And they challenged that because they're like, "Look, I'm not doing anything. Why do you get to run my tag?"
Yeah. Where's the probable cause?
Right. And the concept is, look, I'm just running your tag. Like, I'm not doing anything. It's not imposing on you in any way. We're just gathering information, just kind of looking around, basically. It's like that's what he's doing. So the air marshal sees you visiting or sweating or whatever.
Yeah, right.
And I got him.
Right, I get. Well,
he was going to an interview.
Travelers deserve to know how this surveillance is being implemented and what its consequences are for Americans, and for how long the TSA is retaining the information.
Well, that's the question there.
Yeah.
Are they keeping track of this in some way? Are they tracking you after you leave the airport?
Right.
When you come back for your flight, your return flight?
This is what they're saying, is that once you're on that list,
you're on the list.
You're on the list. That's right. And so they said what we've seen so far is troubling, which is why we're demanding that the TSA hand over records that's been hiding from the public. Well,
I'll tell you when they'll hand them over.
When?
As soon as there's a court case.
Okay.
As soon as they bust somebody and they say, well, we surveilled them using X system.
Right.
The defense attorney will be like, whoa, X what?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because they do that with customs. When people are coming through customs and they want to examine your bags.
Hell yeah. That's the same exact concept.
Okay.
And that's what you want. That's what you want. That's what the Israelis do.
Right.
Profiling. Hell yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we're talking about everybody's life on board here.
Yeah.
Look, I don't mind if somebody's designated to check us all out. I mean, you have to. That's part of the gig. You want to get on the boat that flies. You get to be looked at.
I guess. Anyway, here's a little editorial thing about it that says this is no good. Programs like Quiet Skies and others display what the government thinks of the people. Government thinks the people are the enemy, to be controlled and enslaved through taxation, laws infringing on simple freedoms and constitutional rights, and outright surveillance. TSA is nothing more than a Bush administration jobs program for the chronically unemployed.
So, if there was no TSA, if there was no Federal Aviation Administration and this air marshal were private security, these people would have no beef. They could say nothing. If this was what the airline wanted to implement as their professional security.
Okay, and what's your point?
Well, my point is that that's the way that it should be.
Right, absolutely. And you know that it would be once it's much more market oriented. I mean, as it is now, you don't have a choice.
Right.
You can be thrown up against the table in 2 seconds for giving some TSI guy the stink eye.
Yeah, no, they can probe you in no time.
Well, I mean, you see it on YouTube all the time where some 12-year-old kid in a t-shirt and shorts,
right,
and they're fondling him. For God's sakes, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean,
now okay.
And they miss 80% of the.
And they miss that's right. So
through.
You're wondering.
I carried a lighter for like 2 decades.
Well, it's
in
funny
my carry-on bag.
Well, I did
after 9/11.
I used to have a little knife on my keychain, and I went into the criminal courthouse here, and nobody said anything. Walked through.
Oh, they'll take that if they see it.
Wait a minute. So I walked through the little detector and everything, and because they, you take your shit out and everything. Yeah. So they said, and then I turned out I was in the wrong building. I said, okay, I got it. So now I had to turn around and go back. It was, very. So then I went over to the other building, which was the civil whatever it was, and boy, they confiscated it right there on the spot. Yeah. I mean, and seriously, I mean.
Yeah, no, I know. It's crazy.
And I looked at it, I said, are you nuts? What do you think I'm going to do?
Well, right. I tried to argue one time the definition of a weapon should be something that enhances the hand in terms of the damage that can be inflicted upon somebody. At some point, a straw, for example, or a piece of paper. I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, so if it doesn't do more damage than your hands, I don't see how it can be considered a weapon.
Interesting you should mention that, because I was watching some tricks the other day with cards, and these guys were literally exactly. They were throwing cards and sticking them in wood.
Yeah. Well.
I mean, so you get there and. So deck of cards, no, out, go.
That's right. Shoot them.
Yeah, shoot them.
Down right. The ground.
So anyway, that's the tech. It'd be interesting to hear what other people think of. Of course, the TSA has got a bad rep, I think, for a lot of good reasons. Personally, I think
bad rep for good reasons.
Yeah. Okay, next item is South, and this is another thing that's really interesting to see the 180 turn on this. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, or whatever his name is, has said the ruling African National Congress, or the ANC, must initiate a parliamentary process to enshrine in the Constitution a proposed amendment paving the way for land grabs without compensation. Now, this has been a big deal. He vowed to return the lands owned by the white farmers since the 1600s to the country's black population after he assumed office in February this year. And he said that they're going to institute a constitutional amendment in Parliament. Now, this is interesting because we've seen this before, where we have democratically elected places, and yet you look at it and you're thinking, what are these guys doing? And Hitler was elected democratically, and very across the board. Now, some of them, you look at them and the elections look suspiciously rigged, but still, what can you say? It was a vote. What business is it of mine? Anyway, the ANC will go through the parliamentary process to finalize the proposed amendment to the Constitution that outlines more clearly the conditions under which expropriation of land without compensation can be effected. The millionaire ex-businessman argued that it has become pertinently, clear, I think patently, maybe clear that our people want the Constitution to be more explicit. There have been growing fears that the planned expropriation will deal a blow to commercial farming in the country and might put it on the verge of production food crisis, like happened in Zimbabwe, and also it happened in Rhodesia when they took over I forget what Rhodesia is now. Isn't that?
Yeah.
That's Zambia?
Rhodesia is now Zimbabwe.
Okay, right. So anyway, but before it became Zimbabwe, they were driving the farmers off the land, and that's when they dove into this horrible starvation mode, and I guess that's why they elected a bunch of people and then changed the name of the country. I don't know.
Mugabe. And
was that Mugabe?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, of course he's not running this time, so.
Well, there was like some combination of. Apparently, he took some of the coalition people and put them in his government to try to stay in power.
Yeah.
There's been some riots in the streets recently, still there.
And of course, he's only been in power for, what, 30 years or something?
It's a long time.
A long time. You get ensconced in that kind of thing.
In terms of South Africa, I'm not extremely familiar with the historical politics. I mean, I know the general outline, of course, but it is interesting that the pendulum now is swinging to the point of where they're considering. When they say amend the Constitution to allow land grabs without compensation, that basically what they're basically saying is we're going to legalize theft for a period of time. And the problem with that is that theft is theft no matter if it's legal or not. And the reason it's theft is because of the finite quality that property has.
Right.
That is, once the property is transferred from one person to another, the first party will no longer have the use and benefit of that property.
Right.
And they're going to be none too happy about it. So this is a very dangerous game that they're playing down there. And it doesn't matter what they do, legally speaking. The powers that be better figure out a solution, or they're going to have some major arrest.
In one of the first Star Wars, when they had Palpatine up there and they were asking him about what is the Senate going to say about this. I will make it legal. This kind of thing.
Is that legal?
Yeah, that's right. Is that legal? No, I will make it legal. So that's what they're going to do. But of course, the problem is this is all enforced at the point of a gun.
Right, that's why I said it's actual theft. It doesn't matter what you call it.
Right.
It'll still feel like theft to all the people involved.
And of course, they're talking about, and of course, when you take something by force, you resist that and you die.
Well, and not only that, but that creates the scars for the future and revenge and everything, and the people will be there to avenge that land grab as they are right now. That is to say, here are ostensibly the ancestors from 400 years ago, which I doubt any of those people have traced their ancestry back 400 years and, hey, this was my land back then. I doubt.
Well, you say that, but I mean, the Dutch, of course, settled a good portion of that, called Afrikaans, of course. And I imagine that a lot of those people can trace their...
I'm sure they can trace their ancestry back to the population generally.
Right.
What I'm suggesting is that I doubt that any of them have records to specific parcels of land going back 400 years.
Oh, that's true. Of course, they just settled it.
Well, right. And it was obviously, it was almost certainly, I would imagine, kept in different form from the way the Dutch keep property records and that kind of stuff. I mean, it was this tree and that tree. I mean, I imagine it was a much less sophisticated system of ownership.
Okay.
Clan-based type of thing.
Okay.
Back before the Dutch arrived. So my point is that how are you going to determine with anything that any objective observer would consider to be a reasonable assessment?
Well, you don't. Okay, so screw back 400 years. How about go back 100?
Well, 100 years, it's going to be the same Dutch landowners.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that's right. And, well, of course, that was up in the north, but then the Brits came along, and, of course, they had the Boer Wars, which Churchill was a big deal in that one.
Well, so, I mean, what are you going to do, take it from the Dutch and give it to the English or something?
Yeah, right. Well, that's right. And, of course, as you've recognized, the simple fact is the apartheid was where the whites ruled the blacks. Now, of course, the table is turned, and apparently this is just good news that what's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. And
well, I mean, that's a horrible approach. If that's what they decided
it's
to
terrible.
Do,
and they're gonna fail as much as Maduro. There's no question that when they appropriate stuff like that, if it's based on theft, you've got a problem.
Well, exactly, because you automatically, instantaneously create an incentive for the reverse to happen.
Well, not only that, when you realize that the theft, when something's based on theft and not voluntary exchange, wealth is destroyed.
I mean, I don't know that the property is going to get destroyed in any...
Well, it's not going to be useful as it was before by somebody that owned it, that could care about it. When you find somebody that, as what's happened with Maduro, and he expropriated the oil refineries or whatever, and of course he put his cronies in there, and they didn't know how to run the damn thing.
Well, yeah, but you could have a system down there where there are huge tracts of land owned by these white landowners, and they're not developing it in any way. whereby if you parsed it up and gave it out to a bunch of people and said, you now own this, they might improve upon it. You might actually create wealth that way, but it's still theft. You just can't do that. I mean, the whole 9/10 of our law is based on the concept that property ownership is settled. If you're going to try to put in your Constitution that property ownership is not settled, they're opening up a Pandora's box, because then anybody can come.
Well, so they divide it up and they give the land, 100 acres, whatever it is,
right,
to all these people. But who's to say that they won't come along next week and say, we're taking your land?
Well, that's what I'm getting at, is whenever you do a movement based on something other than voluntary transaction, you create a massive impetus for that process to undo the same way that it was done.
Right.
It's like an equal and opposite reaction type of thing. The smoothest way is for people to do for voluntary transactions.
No question. All right, let me run through. I got two more little girl things here.
Go ahead.
Maine Lobster Festival Queen is in hot water.
Yes. Boiling water.
Yeah. Less than 24 hours, she was named 2018 Marine Sea Goddess. Taylor Hamlin was forced to give up her crown, and one of the reasons was they had went on social media and resurrected some of her own tweets or pictures or something. And in one case, she was holding a joint. She's 18, okay, and in Maine it's 21, I think, in order to have recreational marijuana. And a more recent photo surfaced of the 18-year-old Oceanside high school.
Who's to say she was in Maine? Maybe she was in Amsterdam or something.
Don't know. Anyway, she was still smoking a joint, and she was doing some vaping.
Oh, okay. Ooh. No.
Yeah. Electronics. So anyway, they immediately booted her. But you look at her, she's a cute girl and everything like that, and you got to ask yourself. I guess it's they were worried about. I mean, this Maine Sea Goddess can't have a joint. I don't know. It's just kind of interesting. Okay, and then here's another one. I saw the picture of this girl. I was literally harassed and kicked out of the Bel Air Mall in Mobile, Alabama today because of what I was wearing. Apparently, grown men couldn't contain themselves, so I got kicked out. What happened was she was wearing some real short shorts.
Okay.
And she said,
in Alabama, isn't that standard dress code?
I thought, well, she's
in the South in July.
Right. Well, not only that, yeah, exactly. It's 100 degrees, someplace outside. So, security officer Jay Mathis indicated that he was looking at my butt cheeks, and there was a problem. Don't look at my ass if there's a thought. As well as Security Officer Davis and the head of security Jim Chavis were extremely rude and completely unprofessional about the situation. I told them I have bigger thighs, and it's too hot for jeans, and I can't help it. They ride up a little bit. It doesn't bother me, and it shouldn't bother you. And so they went so far as to threaten to call a police officer. Now, what's interesting, I saw her picture, and she does have the thighs are a monster. Okay. She's a cute girl, don't get me wrong, but these are those cut off jeans that are like this, and they have the little anyway. So apparently this was not appropriate dress code for the mall, and so they kicked her out. Well, of course, the other thing is it's a private place. They can do whatever they want, I suppose. Bible Belt, I guess. That's whatever. And but it does seem, when in this day and age, when you look for, now I realize this mall is not Walmart, but when you see the Walmart pictures and they're not getting,
how about go to the beach? But we're talking about Alabama here. I mean, this formerly in Alabama, in northern Alabama, it's religious country.
Yeah.
So
Bible Belt.
That's it. So she was sinning.
I guess. Well, of course, as she said, she was being, they were ogling at her and couldn't handle it. She says, basically the implication was they couldn't handle
my God,
what was going on in their pants, so they had to kick her out.
Well, craziness, but like you said, private mall, okay, their deal. So fortunately, she wasn't black or anything, so no.
Right. None of that. Well, what's interesting is that some of the comments on these things that I tell you about. Go.
Kicked her out because she was white.
No. It's not that. But she should have said, "Okay, go ahead and call the police."
Oh, right.
I mean, what are the police going to do?
Ma'am,
you got to go. Yeah. I mean,
you're disturbing the peace.
Yeah, you're a peace disturbing the peace.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. We'll see. All right. Well, I got a couple things.
Okay, good.
To me, the most concerning story of the week was when Trump put out the kill order on the media, and then detained Jim Acosta and Jake Tapper in the secret CIA prisons over in
Guantanamo.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I'm pretty sure that's what happened.
Yeah.
Because CNN said that their lives were in jeopardy.
Right.
And so I was glad that he rescinded the kill order at least.
Right. Yeah. That's
on
right.
the media. I have to say I'm laughing a little bit. I want to say I did my piece on CNN last week. Obviously, we pointed out that CNN now is reporting that Trump is conspiring with Russia via his public campaign speeches.
Right.
And they're responding. To me, I'm not blaming CNN for moving into the tabloid media area.
Okay.
Okay. I want people to understand. I think that there's been a huge explosion in advertising revenue potential over the last decade with social media infusion. This incredible sea change in advertising, and it has clearly drawn our former journalistic entities into the sensationalism category.
Okay.
There's no question about it that's happened, but it's fine because everybody understands when you read the Onion, you're not supposed to take it literally.
Right.
When you read the National Enquirer, you're not supposed to take it literally.
Well, unless you are
Men in Black.
Men in Black. Right.
Well, of course. Then you see the truth in there. Okay. And so this is the same kind of thing. People have to be careful these days, but all you have to do is cross-reference, and you can see. I got a couple of charts here. Here's a couple of these media charts. Bias in the media. This first one was obviously put out by the media.
Okay.
Because
we've examined ourselves and found
no bias.
That's
exactly. Right. If you look here at the the people, ABC, CBS, NBC are considered the best original fact reporting and the most non-biased, neutral, and all this kind of stuff. And New York Times is right in here, and Wall Street Journal. This is crazy. But here's another one. This one's a little bit better, and it shows just a little bit, I think, more fairly the bias of some of the groups here. Here's CNN sort of at the mixed quality range here, and over right on the line of leans left and hyper-partisan left. I think that's more appropriate today. As I said, when I was a kid, CNN was fine. But here's another chart which is kind of interesting, which charts the graph based on whether the news source is independent or state or corporate run, and then that versus sort of a take on between tyranny.
Well, look at that. Look at RT is down there up near Freedom.
What's RT? I don't even know.
That's the Russian television.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, well, but it's down here in state run too.
Okay,
so,
well, it is.
So interesting. Yeah. Well, this is kind of an interesting little map, but you basically have to look these days because I think all these sources are changing rather rapidly, and any one of them could become legitimate or illegitimate pretty fast.
Wonder if they have MSNBC, Rachel Maddow.
MSNBC right here, way down here in the tyranny and corporate run image. Yeah. So let's see. I just thought that was interesting. Like I said, I don't blame the media for this. If I were them, they should send somebody to the Trump rally to get bloodied up. They should send somebody in there to get nicked. They draw straws, and somebody should take one for the team.
Take one for the team.
That's it. Because if they could get some real blood, the more blood, the better.
If it bleeds, it leads.
And if they could be a reporter, then I think that they would be off to the races.
Female reporter.
A female
Black.
reporter. Now
Hispanic.
you're on it. There you go.
Oh, I've got it. Lesbian.
Checks all the boxes.
That's right.
And used to be a guy. And then if we could get that reporter to
get wounded.
That's right. Get like an artery slashed or something, near death experience. Well, I guess it doesn't have to be. You just throw a bunch of blood around. But I think that would do. Then a bunch of them show up. If I were them, I would just start showing up at the White House press conference with bandages on. What happened? Oh, just some trumpeteers.
Yeah.
And then he's just more and more. They're just in the sling there, you know.
Well, they've really taken it out on Jim Acosta, haven't they?
Well, he's earning it. I mean, he's diving into the fray and making himself the story. He said his life was in jeopardy.
Oh, right.
Because they were hurling insults. Yeah, he was getting battered
with insults.
by insults and assaulted.
Yeah.
With insults and with.
You know what's
gestures.
interesting is that has he claimed that it has death threats or anything like that?
I haven't seen that yet.
Well, you know what is interesting is that Sarah Huckabee, what's her name?
Sanders. Mm-hmm.
She now has Secret Service protection.
Oh yeah.
I mean.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, we all know. I think we all know. We all should know that the actual violence has been coming from the other side.
Right.
The Trump supporters say a lot of negative stuff, but when it comes down to actually throwing and hurling objects, that seems to be Antifa's MO.
Right.
And they're the left guys, so it's interesting.
Well, you're talking about CNN, what I find interesting is I listened to Scott Adams on Periscope, and everybody ought to listen to him. He's really kind of good. But he says he turns on CNN for entertainment. He says it's really a lot of laughs.
Man, that's the first time I've turned it on in a while. But real quick, just a couple things. I guess we're right on time here. I saw Duarte smashes 30 million in luxury vehicles.
Who?
Duarte.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Why?
Drug dealers' vehicles, to show them. I guess he's never heard of eBay.
No, I was going to say. What,
you sell that shit, man.
Craigslist, anything, just. Oh, I'll tell you.
Trump went a little crazy on some tweeting this over the weekend.
Yeah, now what was that? I didn't quite get all of that.
He tweeted something
LeBron
about,
James.
LeBron James went on to Don Lemon's show, and so Trump tweeted out Don Lemon is an idiot, and he made LeBron look good. And people are saying that that's racist because they're black.
Right.
He didn't say it's because they're black, but whatever. They're going to infer that he hates black people anyway. But obviously the statement itself wasn't. But also he tweeted out just now that the meeting at the Trump Tower, they were trying to get information about Hillary.
Okay.
But that nothing materialized.
Right. Well, we know that.
Well, sort of. He didn't have to say that what the meeting was for. Now there's a question of how he knew what the meeting was for. It's just more information. I'm getting at is he needs to stop tweeting. This is just stupid.
Yeah, because I mean I heard that they. They went up there and they met whatever for 5 or 10 minutes. That this is a waste of time and left.
Right. Well, that's exactly what happened. I mean, by all accounts, even I've got Tapper at CNN saying nothing happened at the meeting. But it's just he's just flirting with it. It's just dumb. It's just crazy. All right, that's it. That's all I got.
Okay.
So let's see.
We'll be back Wednesday. 4 o'clock.
Yep. So tune in anytime. Send us a message. We'll be happy to comment on things. Feel free to share this with your friends. And we'll see you soon.
Or you'll see us anyway, we hope.